If you're preparing for, well, here's the jump off going for Tailwind, then yes, you can just switch the mode up with the Trick Room with the Porygon 2.
Well, Porygon 2 going to be hitting the field right now, trainers. It's Swiss round 5. Let's go here in Gdańsk, alongside the Incineroar and Annihilape and Dragonite. So Annihilape going to get an immediate Defiant boost.
Yeah, this has worked out pretty well for Oliver, I would say. With that multi-scale on the Dragonite, of course, it is going to be intimidated, and Dragonite won't be able to do too much damage here. Annihilape can do loads of damage now it's been intimidated, especially with the fact that it's got close combat over the much more common Drain Punch. You usually go for Bulk Up so that Drain Punch can do loads of damage. You don't need it. You're a +1 now. You've got close combat. That will KO probably the, well, definitely the Incineroar, maybe the Porygon 2. If you're not confident that would KO, you've got the option of Final Gambit into the Porygon 2 as well, which definitely picks up the KO. The base HP of Annihilape is so much higher than the Porygon 2, it will definitely be able to pick up that knockout. So yeah, this Annihilape, a fantastic lead into both a Porygon 2 and an Incineroar. You basically get to choose which Pokemon you want to knock out here with either the close combat or the Final Gambit.
Yeah, Final Gambit, of course, dealing damage equal to the number of hit points that the opposing Pokemon has. Now, Dragonite off the field. Ursaluna, the Sleepy, comes in. Well, wake up, Ursaluna, because you're in a fantastic position. Going to be Porygon 2 switching out for Marco here as well. Potentially feeling that that was going to be targeted down. Jumpluff, able to take Fighting type moves so much better. Resisted thanks to being part Flying type. And it's time to Terrastalize, JB.
Yeah, you don't want to be taking those Fighting type attacks with your Incineroar that was previously a Dark type, now a Ghost. It would be immune to those attacks. So even if the Annihilape went for that Rage Fist, it's not taken any hits yet. It won't do too much damage at all.
Close combat was targeting down into the Incineroar there, so a nice call from Marco, but the Terrastalization option is spent for this game. Now Knockoff, going to be able to remove Annihilate Safety Goggles, going to make it vulnerable now to Sleep Powder when once it was protected from that. Gives Ursaluna a turn as well, thanks to that immediate switch in to get burned, get that Guts ability active, boosting up its physical attack.
Yeah, very nicely done there from Marco. Of course, the Ursaluna is now threatening a lot of damage, but the Annihilate was as well, and to be able to reposition like that, very nicely done. Oh, but there's the Sleep Powder miss. The Safety Goggles were gone. That could have been a Sleeping Annihilate.
Yeah, the Sleep Powder there, not 100% accurate. Rage Fist now super effective into the Incineroar, and with the knockoff boosting up that move, the more hits Annihilate takes, the more powerful Rage Fist becomes. One-hit knockout onto the Incineroar here. Oliver firmly in the driver's seat.
Yeah, for sure. Fasad's going to knock out this Jumpluff. It's not the bulkiest of Pokemon. Ursaluna is one of the heaviest hitters we have when it does have that Guts-boosted Facade, easily enough to pick up the one-hit KO. And that just shows the volatility of Sleep Powder. It can be incredibly impactful when it does connect, but it does have that shaky accuracy. And if you do miss, well, then suddenly the Annihilate's not asleep here. It was very smartly done to knock off the Safety Goggles. That even gave the option to be able to go for Sleep Powder. But yeah, that is a very, very unfortunate miss of that Sleep Powder. Now this Annihilape is still in a brilliant position. It's facing two normal types that can no longer Terrastalize, so it can very freely just launch off a close combat, and that should probably be able to KO either Pokemon here.
Yeah, and Porygon 2 here, at least it does have the Ice Beam, so it's threatening super effective damage onto the Ursaluna. It also got a special attack boost thanks to the download ability when it switched onto the field. So Marco down, not out yet, but it's such a convincing lead right now for Oliver. Already Marco's got to be thinking towards game 2, how to get rid of that. But Final Gambit now just onto Porygon 2. No longer enough to secure the knockout there, given Annihilape had taken so much HP. Oliver clearly just wanting a free switch into something in the back, but Facade easily enough now to take care of it.
Yeah, very nicely done there. The Final Gambit, all the close combat, that would have done enough in combination with that Facade to KO. We get to find out at least the speed order this turn. That's not doing much at all without that burn. You need to get that Guts boost to be able to do some significant damage. You can see how much stronger the Facade is when you are burned. And the fact that Oliver's Ursaluna was moving first, that means that Marco's is not the faster one here and has to deal with two more Pokemon. Here's the Dragonite as well. So this is just going to be a pretty safe attack, either the Extreme Speed or the Scale Shot. Extreme Speed safer. Obviously, you don't want to miss. You've got 100% accurate moves, and you're going to be faster. You can just take this KO on this Ursaluna.
Dragonite looking lively, and yes, Facade, a move that increases in power if the user has a status condition. Marco, even though this game is fairly wrapped up at this point, just taking time to reflect heading into game 2. So swiftly dealt with by Oliver there. And yes, the miss from Jumpluff Sleep Powder, really, really crucial. Could have slowed the game down.
It definitely could have done. The Incineroar would have survived. It would have gone for whatever attack it was going to go for. We'll never know. But yeah, the Incineroar would have survived, be at full HP, being able to come back, recycle, fake outs, intimidates in the future as well. I just think the Annihilate was just a fantastic addition there, deviating from its most common set. We see Drain Punch, Rage Fist, Bulk Up, Protect on almost every single Annihilate, apart from the Choice Scarf ones. This isn't a Choice Scarf one.
Yeah.
But close combat, threatening huge damage, forcing the defensive terrestrialization on the Incineroar turn 1. Drain Punch may not have needed to do that. Drain Punch at +1, probably not enough to KO an Incineroar. Close combat for sure. But now, with the dodge, Rage Fist is enough to be able to pick up the KO. So if the Jumpluff does connect that, maybe Marco wants to go with a similar strategy, because if the Sleep Powder connects, which is in his favor, then he's in a good position. But if it misses, then the game is kind of over straight away.
Yeah, Ghost and Fighting provides such good coverage on that Annihilate, because, yeah, you're threatening normal types and dark types with super effective damage. Then the Incineroar goes to the Terra Ghost. You're then threatening with super effective damage from the Rage Fist there. So, as you say, Jamie, I mean, coming down to a Sleep Powder miss, it could well be the case that Marco goes for a similar game plan heading into that game. But if you are relying on a not 100% accurate move, maybe you want to go with something more consistent here. And, you know, Annihilate is a bulky Pokemon, but a Sun, Solar Power boosted Charizard, Choice Specs boosted Fire-type moves would also threaten massive damage into it. In fact, apart from the Dragonite, there's no Pokemon on Oliver's team that resists fire.
Yeah, I think the Charizard would be a very reasonable adjustment here for Marco. Leading with Incineroar did not pan out very well in the face of that Defiant Annihilate, so leaving Incineroar, at least in the back, maybe on the bench, might be beneficial for Marco here, because the Charizard would have done actually pretty significant damage across that game. It was the Dragonites, the Ursaluna, and the Annihilate. And Charizard naturally outspeeds all of those, assumingly it's run as fast as possible when it's holding that Choice Specs, so should be able to outspeed and just launch off those massive heat waves. Yes, it is also inconsistent. It's more consistent than a Sleep Powder, though.
Yeah, it certainly is. Sleep Powder, not 100% accurate. A move like Spore is, but it tends to be slower Pokemon that get access to Spore, and the draw of using something like Jumpluff or indeed a Vivillon is how speedily you can get the Sleep Powder off. You can shut down a Pokemon before it moves that turn, as opposed to giving it the luxury of moving before putting it to sleep here. But either way, both these trainers very, very skilled indeed, and it's nearly time to be getting into this game too. Can Marco claw this back? Now, it's not a knockout at this stage in the competition. We'd just go at a 4-1 record, but of course, the fewer losses you have, the greater the chances you have of making top cut tomorrow in day 2.
Yeah, for sure. And Marco's definitely a player that can figure out the adjustments that is necessary. So much experience behind both of these trainers. But then at the same time, because there's so much experience with Oliver, does he make any kind of adaptations expecting Marco's?
Yeah, exactly. These are the mind games that are present in this game, trainers. Let's get into it. Game 2, there it is. Charizard Jumpluff coming out for Marco in the face of Annihilate and the Dragonite.
And as cool as the Annihilate set is, it doesn't carry Protect. So if this Charizard is run as fast as possible, then it's a pretty straightforward Sunny Day into a Heat Wave, and that probably KOs the Annihilate here. It does actually have its defensive terrestrialization available to it in the Water type, which would be able to shrug it off. And the coaching is actually really cool as well, because Dragonite, like we said, that's the only resistance to fire, so it would be able to survive any of the Heat Waves that could be coming out. And then it'll be able to respond back with a Scale Shot, which +1 would definitely KO a Charizard or a Jumpluff. At neutral, probably not the Jumpluff, because it would have been trained quite bulky, but the Charizard, maybe even a KO.
Yeah, especially with the multi-scale ability as well, mitigating damage. It's Orange Dragon versus Orange Dragon. It's also no Sunny Day, just an immediate Sleep Powder, so Dragonite the Lively is looking a whole lot less lively now. Heat Wave, how much is it going to do outside of the sun? Decent, and it gets the burn onto the Annihilate. This is exactly the turning of tables that Marco needed right now.
Yeah, that's a very, very significant burn there. The Annihilate's not going to do the damage, and now it's going to help out its partner do the damage instead. There is that coaching into the Dragonite, but of course it's guaranteed to sleep this turn. Very, very nicely done there for Marco. That did significant damage to the Annihilate. It might even be in range of another Heat Wave, even without a Sunny Day.
Yeah, it certainly could be, and with Dragonite taking a snooze there, at least it's burnt that turn on this turn. So on the following one, maybe it will wake up. Only time will tell, but it's only the one mandatory turn of sleep this Dragonite has to take already into the next turn. Now it's time for Charizard to get its solar panels active.
Yeah, you'll be surprised how much damage this does. Look, that's a resistance on Dragonite. Obviously, the Annihilate was going down with that Sun boost, but that's a resistance. Charizard just doesn't care about that, and with the Dragonite still staying asleep this turn, not being able to get off its Scale Shot, which would probably KO the opposing Charizard. Now it's just going to be another Heat Wave here. That Sluna's not a resistance. That's probably being KO'd to Heat Wave as well.
And it could be even sleepier if another Sleep Powder was to come out from Jumpluff. Yes, Charizard here with the Solar Power, of course, that ability means that it takes a little bit of its health away at the end of each turn. And the return on that, of course, is that it's boosted. It has even more power coming out thanks to the Solar Power ability. And as you said, Jamie, stacking with the Choice Specs there. I mean, yeah, what with Dragonite on such low HP, Charizard could well be having an absolute inferno infernal parade on the field right now. It's no Hisuian Typhlosion, but that's the way it's looking.
This is exactly what a Charizard can do. It is one of the strongest attackers that we have in the game when it's in the sun. And now it is in the sun. That's forcing this Ursaluna to go for that Protect. Dragonite, if it dodges, maybe we'll have a chance to be able to get that Scale Shot, but it won't be able to even outspeed the Charizard now that a Jumpluff set the Tailwind.
Yeah, Jumpluff has been going for a different move on every turn, and they have all been so useful here. Now Charizard hitting even faster, Dragonite on such low HP anyway. It was asleep, it's now KO'd. It's Oliver down to just final 2 Pokemon. This is an exact reverse of what we saw in Game 1, where it was such a convincing lead for Marco.
Yeah, it didn't seem like there was really many answers at all coming out on Oliver's side of the field, and Golden Go's not an answer to a Charizard either. So yeah, and now the Tailwind's been set, the Charizard's definitely faster than even this Choice Scarf Golden Go. So you really have to be relying on some dodges of that Heat Wave. It's so strong, but is a little bit unreliable. If it does double connect here, the game's just over. There's no way that both these Pokemon are surviving. Even Ursaluna, as bulky as it is, does not resist the Heat Wave, and we saw how much it did to a resistance in that Dragonite, so it should be able to pick up that knockout there as well.
And it's Terra Steel on the Golden Go for Oliver, so not able to Terrastallize away from its fire weakness. Now, Rage Powder, that's the reveal of the 4th move that we haven't seen the Jumpluff go for. And there we go, 4 turns, Jumpluff went for all 4 of its moves. That is the sign of a well-used Pokemon there. Really amplifying the moveset that Jumpluff has access to. Just goes to show the power of support Pokemon. Only 2 Pokemon for the entire game for Marco there, just the Jumpluff and the Charizard. So now, the big question for Oliver, of course, is how do you mitigate the damage output from the Charizard?
Oh, there is the Terra Water available on that Annihilate, and that would be able to shrug off the attacks a little bit more comfortably. We did see that Oliver was contemplating going for that on that first turn, and then decided against it, and took almost half even out of the sun. Yes, it did get burned, but that didn't end up coming into play because it went for coaching that turn, and then was just in range of the sun-boosted Heat Wave now as well. And like we said, the Dragonite is really the only resistance. Maybe you need to be able to avoid any Sleep Powders, and I don't really see any ways to stop the Jumpluff going for the Sleep Powder here. There's no, well, even, I was going to say, even if there was Fake Out, it's got the Covert Cloak. Even if there was Rage Powder on the Vivian, it's a Grass type. So there's no real way of stopping the Sleep Powders. But we also saw in that Game 1, what happens if you miss the Sleep Powder? Yeah. Well, then suddenly the game was over straight away. So, yes, it is a inconsistent strategy, but we can see how effective it can be when it works in that Game 2, but we can also see the detriment of that Shaky Axie that we saw in the Game 1.
And Annihilate is holding the safety goggles, so it would be able to remain awake even in the face of those Sleep Powders. Golden Go with its good as gold ability as well, making it safe from status moves. If you look at Oliver's own sleep user, let's say Vivian, it's not going to be as fast as Jumpluff in the sun. And yeah, so Oliver kind of on the back foot here in the face of this Jumpluff. Sure, you want to hope for a miss on the Sleep Powder, but you also would like to go for a more consistent strategy from that. And it's all about trying to neutralize this Charizard while you can. Ursaluna, of course, doesn't mind being burned as well. In fact, it wants that. A big Facade, that would be good damage. Maybe the Terra Water. Let's see what Oliver's thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking if there's the same lead, maybe an Extreme Speed and a Rage Fist will be able to take care of the Charizard, because, like we said, the Annihilate has home the safety goggles, so it can't be Sleep Powdered. There is the switch up. It is Ursaluna over the Dragonite here, and yeah, we can see the Terra Water is still available for that Annihilate. If Sunny Day isn't clicked, then it will take, what, 20% from the Heat Wave? And maybe a now boosted Rage Fist up to 100 base power would be enough to KO the Charizard. And if it's not, it will be close to putting it in range of the Solar Power recoil that it would take if the Sunny Day is active as well.
Brings me back to the days of Sword and Shield and Gigantamax Charizard, but it's no G-Max Wildfire here, though you'd be forgiven for thinking it was, given the damage output. Dragonite is going to be switching right in. Let's Terrastallize immediately, trainers. Why not? It's our beloved mechanic heading into the Annihilate, and it is indeed becoming that Terra Water. It's embracing this maritime theme here in Gdańsk, taking a dip in the pool, making it resist those fire-type moves when once they were doing neutral damage. Sunny Day, here we go.
And we saw that resistance doesn't matter as much for a Charizard here, because that's a Sun Boost Event. Look how strong this is going to be.
Oh my goodness.
A Terra Water, but it was able to survive. That was a resistance and it did 90%, but a very clutch Terra Water there. Now this is a boosted Rage Fist into that Charizard. Very significant damage, but crucially, the Charizard able to survive. But that's got to be Extreme Speed range.
Yeah, true. Really well played by Oliver here, getting the Extreme Speed user in, able to potentially pick off that Charizard while it can. But you do have the Rage Powder from the Jumpluff, so keeping the Charizard safe there, potentially able to break the multi-scale onto the Dragonite as well. But at least you made a big dent in the Pokemon that was causing you so many problems in the previous game.
Yeah, you do actually have two ways to mitigate this extreme speed. There's Terra Ghost available on the Charizard as well, and even if you didn't want to commit to it, which it seems like Marco is, Rage Powder would have out-prioritized the extreme speed because they have the same priority, but Jumpluff is faster, so it would have been able to redirect that extreme speed, but no need. Here's the Terra Ghost. You can't extreme speed a Ghost type.
And it just goes to show how, yeah, you might be tempted to run Terra Fire just to boost that power output even more, but you've got to have those pivoting supportive pieces as well with the Terra Ghost. Now, Sleep Powder will be connecting onto the Dragonite here. This is exactly the position Marco wants to be in. Another overheat, even though this Charizard has taken a harsh recall to its special attack and now takes another one. That's enough to secure the knockout on the Annihilate. You can now have more leeway to switch out the Charizard, reset the move it's locked into with that sleeping Dragonite on the field.
Yeah, and at least the Dragonite's taken its mandatory turn of sleep on this turn, so now you still have to contend with the Sleep Powders. Yes, the Ursaluna could be protecting itself and get burned so it can no longer be, but then you just won't have the momentum. Oh, that's really cool there. The Porygon 2 coming in and tracing the Chlorophyll, so depending on the training of the Porygon 2, might be able to outspeed that Charizard, which could force the Jumpluff into a Tailwind, freeing up the fact that it wouldn't go for a Sleep Powder this turn. So very, very interesting there as well. If the Porygon 2's run really slow, it still won't outspeed the Charizard. But yeah, the training here is going to be incredibly impactful, especially because the Jumpluff is switching out and not clicking Tailwind this turn.
Yeah, Charizard staying in for the time being as Marco's own Porygon 2, the once well-trained, joining the field here, does get a boost to its special attack and has access to Ice Beam, and it will be the double switch actually from Marco here, so Charizard able to reset its move. Of course, the ability we see far more often on Porygon 2 is going to be download rather than the trace, so to see that coming out and so useful for Oliver here as well with Chlorophyll, really huge. And there you go, Ice Beam now going off first here into Marco's own Porygon 2. Dragonite fast asleep as Incineroar has joined the field.
Yeah, very, very nicely done there for Marco. Not taking too much damage there, not taking the risk of the Porygon not being a super slow one because it could have outsped that Charizard. Ice Beam would have obviously been able to snipe off that Jumpluff very nicely, but that was not much damage at all into the Porygon 2. And now he can just completely switch up his strategy. You don't really even need to Trick Room in the face of this, preserving the Charizard in the back so that it's now reset its a -4 special attack and can just lock into Heat Wave in the future. You've still got the Sleep Powder pressure available with the Jumpluff in the future as well. In the sun, Incineroar also does some pretty significant damage with Flare Blitz. And you can knock off the Eviolite if you want to be able to do extra damage in the future. You could knock off the loaded dice so that Scale Shot might only even do 2 or 3 hits.
Yeah, Scale Shot, of course. That's a move that can hit 2 or 5 times. You probably don't want to set up the Trick Room if you're Marco too. But with Jumpluff being so speedy and Charizard also on the speedier side of things, Incineroar is going to have its berry snack on the field now. At least Oliver's Dragonite has woken up, so it's able to provide more on the field than once it could. Knock off, though, really nice into Oliver's Porygon 2. Eviolite removed. Therefore, its defenses are what they normally would be. Porygon 2 much less bulky. I mean, look at how it took that Terra Blast.
Yeah, very, very nicely done there. The Porygon 2 incredibly low. Of course, it's still going to be the fastest thing on the field thanks to that very interesting interaction of tracing the Chlorophyll. But the Dragonite, it was able to get the double power stomping tantrum because it was asleep on the previous turn and failed to move. That's why it did so much more damage to the Incineroar. But because that was the amount of damage it did, probably not in range of a regular old stomping tantrum after the Intimidate. That means that the Porygon 2 with the Dragonite might need to double into the Incineroar to be able to pick up that KO. But then that allows the Porygon 2 on Marco's side of the field to do whatever it wants. Porygon 2's in Terra Blast range now. But yes, the Dragonite is still got its multi-scale intact, so Ice Beam, it should be able to survive that. But yeah, there's still it seems like it's anyone's game here.
Well, Thunderbolt connecting into the Incineroar, chipping away at it, and now the follow-up Scale Shot certainly going to be enough to secure the knockout onto the Incineroar, but I don't think you mind this too much if you're Marco. You've got the Sun still active on the field. You can get a more heavy hitter switching in from the back, and by heavy hitter, we all know that I mean that Charizard here. While the Sun is active, because it will be expiring after a few turns, you've got the Jumpluff able to click that Sunny Day once more. It's so nice to have that option. Ice Beam, multi-scale on the Dragonite. What multi-scale? Taking huge damage there. And now, really nice timing for Marco. You can switch in that Jumpluff. Again, get that Sunny Day set up for the Charizard in the back.
Oh, but can it, though? Because the Sun's gone. Is the Dragonite now faster than the Jumpluff? Most of the scale shot loaded dice Dragonites are run fast enough to probably outspeed a Sneasler, and Jumpluff is slower than Sneasler, so I would assume that this Dragonite is now the fastest thing on the field without that sun. There's no Torkoal available. It was manual sunny day to be able to get that Chlorophyll boost, and of course that also means the Porygon 2 on Oliver's side of the field is slower as well. So now we'll be able to see the actual speed interaction between the two Porygon 2s. But yeah, the Jumpluff, it depends on its training here, because Dragonite does a lot of damage with Scale Shot. I reckon that if the Scale Shot goes into that Jumpluff, it's going to be incredibly close. If 4 shots hits into it, it won't get it. 5 would be incredibly close.
Yeah, fine margins here. Both of these trainers, 1 game apiece. So whoever wins this game is going to be declared our winner of Swiss Round 5. Ursaluna once more heads onto the field. It's still Sleepy. And if Sleep Powder were to come out into that even more, here's the Scale Shot, but no. That's really not very much damage at all into the Jumpluff. Going to be easily enough to hang on, and that is huge for Marco here. Jumpluff just paving the way for the Charizard lurking in the back. It's all about thinking a few turns ahead and knowing that if you get that Jumpluff in the right position now, then Charizard on a future turn is going to be even better set up. Dragonite gets yet another speed boost. Time for the Tailwind, in fact, to come out from the Jumpluff. Marco aware that the health bars on Oliver's side of the field are dwindling. Don't need that extra damage with the sunny day.
Oh, wow. Look at that damage as well from the Ice Beam into the switching in Ursaluna. Wow, lots of damage coming out there. We need to remember about the previous Intimidate from the Incineroar onto this Dragonite. Yes, the multi-scale was nice, so it survived the Ice Beam, but then that meant that it was intimidated, and we saw that that was not even close to KO in that Jumpluff with the Scale Shot. And it looks like even without the Intimidate, it would have just about hung on. But yeah, now the Tailwind's been set. The Porygon 2 is definitely the fastest thing on the field. You get to pick your knockout. Whether you go for the Ice Beam to the Dragonite or the Ice Beam to the Ursaluna doesn't particularly matter. But Jumpluff doesn't have any offensive moves, so you only get 1 knockout this turn. That frees up the Pokemon that isn't KO'd on Oliver's side of the field to be able to take its choice of knockout. Facade probably KOs the Porygon 2, whereas Scale Shot probably won't. So if you do target the Ursaluna, then you're probably not getting a KO on this side of the field, and you definitely can't if you're asleep either.
Dragonite falls asleep just to secure that for Marco. The Porygon 2 is definitely the fastest thing on the field. That's not something that I'd hear you ever say, Jamie. It's very rare, but here we are in this position as Porygon 2. Now, of course, the Ice Beam easily enough to secure the knockout onto the Ursaluna here. Oliver forced to bring in that Porygon 2 from the back. So Marco still with that Charizard lurking, with the health bar solo. Just look at that. Porygon 2 very low on the orange, Dragonite in the red and asleep. Marco seems to have pivoted this game around when it used to be such a commanding victory in game 1 for Oliver.
Yeah, absolutely was. And I see a pretty safe path to victory for Marco here because that Eviolite's gone on the Porygon 2. It's definitely in range of a Terra Blast coming out from the Porygon 2 on Marco's side of the field. So you can just go for a Rage Powder and attack into the Porygon 2, and then you have 2 100% accurate moves from your Dragon Pulse on Charizard and the Ice Beam from the Porygon 2, and that would be enough to be able to pick up this KO.
Yeah, Oliver's Dragonite is staying asleep as well. It's decided, no, this is a lost cause, I may as well just extend my nap. Porygon 2 going to have a KO rather than a nap, and so it's now just the Dragonite in the face of all the offense that Marco can be dishing out.
And he only needs to click 1 offensive attack to be able to claim this victory. Oliver knows it. He's going to throw in the towel here, and Marco is going to win round 5 in the Gdańsk Regional Championship.
Wow, I absolutely love that game. Not only the fact that we had 2